You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us again this week. I was just enjoying a wonderful discussion with Members Club here in Platform Launchers, and we were talking about a variety of things, but one of the things we were talking about is our primary subject tonight, and it's the concept of overwhelm. And we're going to be talking about what it looks like to prevent overwhelm from stealing your momentum. So just kind of think about that for a second. And I'll just ask it this way as we begin. As a content creator, have you personally ever struggled with feeling overwhelmed? I actually asked our group about this just a few minutes ago, and every single hand in the group was raised. Every single one of us could point to a time where we specifically struggled with feeling overwhelmed. And my follow-up question to that is, when you start to get overwhelmed, what happens to your momentum? Now, I think I know the answer to that. I think when we start to get overwhelmed, our momentum really starts to dip. And I completely understand that struggle. There have been many moments over the course of my life that have left me feeling stuck and so stressed that I really didn't feel like I could get anything productive accomplished. And I remember one particular season of life when I felt particularly overwhelmed. And that feeling was keeping me from finishing some very important tasks. And I learned some lessons through the experience that have had a huge impact on many areas of my life, many areas of my family, my leadership, and the process that I utilize to help consistently create content. I learned a lot through the overwhelm, and much of what I learned was how not to repeat some of these mistakes. And so I'm going to share my story with you and transition that into a few steps that I have that I will recommend to you. I actually have 4 steps I'm going to recommend that will help you prevent becoming overwhelmed and losing the momentum that you're trying to build as you create your content. So let me take you all the way back to the year 2006. And in 2006, I had a ridiculous amount on my plate at that particular season of life, and so did my wife. We had just welcomed the birth of our 4th child in 6 years. So she was born right before 2006 started. December of 2005, she was born. So now in 2006, there we were with child number 4, all 4 of those children born within those 6 years. And at the time, while we were juggling all the different family responsibilities we were juggling, I was also juggling leadership responsibilities for 2 jobs. I'd taken on 2 jobs that were both essentially full-time. Now, there was some overlap with the 2 of them, and that's a different story, I guess, for another day. But I was juggling the leadership responsibilities that came with 2 jobs. And at the same time I was doing that, I was also volunteering my time with several ministries that were certainly important to me and certainly things that I valued, serving on boards, helping out in different areas. And I also had a side business as a licensed mortgage broker for here in the state of Pennsylvania. And that was going on. So I've got family things, ministry things, leadership things, job responsibilities. And then at the same time that was going on, I started to create online content. I was dabbling into doing that. And I was also dabbling into various forms of print media and broadcast media. So all of that was going on all at the same time. It was quite a lot. It was absolutely exhausting. But if you asked me at the time if I liked what I did, I would have said absolutely. Every one of those things on the list, I would have said essentially every single one of them I enjoy. They're all things that I like. But the problem I was running into was the fact that I kept saying yes to way too many things. That was something that I was really wrestling with. I kept saying yes to way too many things. And if you looked at my life closely, you would have seen some evidence that I was becoming completely overwhelmed. And I didn't catch it at first, but I started to catch it over time. And most of the time, when we become overwhelmed, we stop making meaningful progress in a variety of areas. And in 2006, my sense of overwhelm was making itself visible in several ways. Now, the most obvious way I think that my sense of overwhelm was really becoming visible was with the weight that I was gaining. And I'll tell you a little something about myself. Maybe you want to know it, maybe you don't, but I'm just going to tell you it anyway. In the interest of full disclosure, when I am stressed, I tend to overeat. And let's just put it this way. In 2006, I was so stressed that I needed to purchase a new wardrobe. So what does that tell you about how much eating I was doing at that particular season? It wasn't good. It wasn't healthy. It was the most noticeable thing probably changing in my life, the fact that my weight was drastically changing in a short period of time. Now, at the same time, we had also moved during that particular season, and I was trying to sell our old house. But if you've ever sold a house, you know that one of the things that you usually want to do before you get the house on the market are any of the deferred maintenance that you haven't taken care of, or anything that you feel like it needs to be updated so that it shows well in pictures and things like that. So the property needed a little bit of work before I could put it on the market. It really didn't need much, but it felt like a lot because I was overwhelmed with so many other things. And I wasn't getting the work done in a timely manner. I really didn't have a whole lot of time. And there were a couple things that I needed to do that either I didn't really own the right tools to do them. And then there was like one thing that I had to do with a wall that I wasn't sure how to do it. And so I kind of looked at it and it just felt impossible at that point. And I was also kind of concerned that my budget wasn't going to allow me to hire someone to make the repairs for me. And so I was feeling kind of stuck there. Well, at the time, we also had a third vehicle. Now, I didn't need a third vehicle at the time. I'd purchased a 1990 Mazda Miata a couple of years prior to that I very much enjoyed owning. It was a car that didn't really cost me a whole lot. I think I only paid like $3,300 for it, something like that. And I owned that. I enjoyed owning it, but something was wrong with it. And I could tell it wasn't even a major fix, but I didn't have time to focus on it. And so that car sat for many months in our carport because I really didn't feel like I had the time to investigate what it needed. And I remember it sitting there for so long that one of the tires just went flat. And so I'm like, all right, great. I have this car that won't run and it's got a flat tire and it just looks terrible. And it's sitting in this carport of a house that I'm trying to sell. And that doesn't look so good. And again, I was pretty sure that whatever was wrong with it was a pretty easy fix, but I was too exhausted to worry about it. And since I had other priorities that felt much more pressing, the car didn't move. It honestly didn't move for almost a year. It just kind of sat there. And I just looked at it. I was like, I don't know. I'll worry about it some other day. And so as I handled the responsibilities of my jobs and my side projects and my volunteer ministries, I was also starting to feel kind of guilty because I felt like I was robbing my family of time that I wanted to be able to spend with them, but I didn't feel like I had extra time. And I hated how that felt. But I wasn't sure how I was going to offer them more time because I really didn't feel like I had spare time to give. And all of this was building up and building up and building up. And I remember at one point just thinking, I need a break. Like, I need to get away from all this stuff. I don't want to look at these things. I don't want to think about my problems. I don't want to think about how overwhelmed I feel. I just need to get away and do something different. And so in exhaustion, I still remember the evening I did this. I remember just walking over to my wife. She was sitting down at the desk doing some work on something. And I just said to her, I said, Andrea, we need a vacation. And there was no argument from her on that. She agreed. We very much needed a vacation. But then I followed that up by saying, now we live in Pennsylvania, all right? So it's not exactly close to where I suggested, but I said to her, let's drive to Florida. And she laughed because she didn't really take me seriously, because one of the things that she would tell you was true of me during that season of life was that I had a habit of almost never taking time off. I very rarely took time off, which I thought was like a badge of honor. Now I look back at it and I think that's ridiculous. It's unhealthy for me. It's unhealthy for my family. It's also unhealthy for the work I'm trying to do and the things I'm trying to lead. And so she didn't really take me seriously when I said, let's drive to Florida, but I meant it. And she told me later on that she became convinced that I was serious the moment I reserved for and paid for our hotel, because she said, there's no way you would do that if we're not actually taking this trip to Florida. You paid for the hotel. That means we're actually going. And I think she even phrased it like a question. It was like, wow, so we're really taking time off and going to Florida? And I said, yes, we're going. And it was in the heart of winter. It was a perfect time for us to escape snowy temperatures and snowy climates. And we were just happy to go there. And the vacation was exactly what I needed to reset my internal clock. I just needed to reset everything. I needed a true vacation to help liberate my mind from the many responsibilities that I was trying to juggle on a daily basis. I needed to press pause on everything I was doing, and just spend some time with my family so I could reevaluate my outside commitments and reevaluate the pattern of life that at this point I had become accustomed to. And here's what happens next. And you're going to see directly how this could impact these patterns or these things that I learned in the process, how this could have an impact on your content creation schedule. Follow me on this. So the trip to Florida, it was unbelievably restful. I was able to spend time with our family. I was able to gain some much needed clarity on some of the changes that I needed to make in my life. When we came home, I remember at that point, I began the process of stepping down from many of my volunteer positions. I actually prepared at that point to leave one of my jobs, and I helped find new leadership to fill the role that I was filling in that particular job. I also found the money to hire a contractor to repair the problems with the home that we still needed to sell, and thankfully the house sold soon after. I fixed the minor issue with the car. It ended up being something very minor, and I sold the car too. I was like, you know what? I just need to sell the car. I don't need this extra car right now, and it wasn't a good time. Anyway, and then I set aside a night each week that could be a date night, just me and my wife. And I blocked off another night dedicated to doing something fun together as a family with the kids, with no outside interruptions, nothing else. It would just be us and the kids, and we would pretend that the rest of the world didn't exist that one night each week. And inspired by all this change and the new margin that all of a sudden I felt like I had in my life, another cool thing happened. I also ended up losing during the course of that year 50 pounds because I had time to eat better and I had time to take daily walks. Those were two things that I really didn't have time for prior. And I have to tell you, it honestly became one of the happiest and most productive years of my life. So what lessons can we pull from that experience that could help us if we're in the process of developing an online platform and yet we've been feeling maybe overwhelmed with everything we feel we need to do, and maybe that feeling is causing us to lose momentum? What kind of lessons could we pull from that experience? Well, here's what I would recommend. If you're starting to feel a sense of overwhelm that's impacting the kind of momentum that you're trying to drum up, 4 steps I want to recommend. Here's step number 1, and it's very obvious. Just take a break. Step number 1, take a break. So I'm guessing you'll feel a lot like I did if you allow yourself to press pause on many of the things you're juggling. If you're genuinely starting to feel overwhelmed and that's impacting your momentum, just press pause. It doesn't mean you have to end everything you're doing. Just press pause just for a little bit. And if possible, if this is possible for you, I'd actually recommend that maybe you schedule some time away with your family and don't take work with you. Just take a true pause. Give your mind time to heal. I have for me that it usually takes more than a week for me to get to that spot. So if this is possible, and I know this isn't possible for most people at most times, it could be very tricky to do this. But if you were in some way, if you're feeling completely overwhelmed and you were able to block off 10 days in a row to disappear and just do something with those that you love, I would totally recommend that. If you can't do that, I would imagine most people would find that to be a bit of a stretch, the whole 10-day thing. And maybe it's not even possible for you to completely get away from your normal context right now. I would still encourage you to think about taking a break from many of the things you're doing. Give yourself permission to schedule whatever kind of break will work for you, because I think it's in the midst of those breaks that we get a little bit more clear on our thinking. All right, step number 2 is this. And this is such a struggle for me even now sometimes. I'm a little better at this, but step 2 is you got to stop saying yes to everything. Stop saying yes to everything. Now, that you'd like all aspects of your online platform to be running at full capacity, but it isn't realistic to get it all going at the same time. You might be able to get some of it going at the same time, but it's not really realistic to get it all going at the same time. You're going to have to say no to something. Even if it's a temporary no, you're still going to have to say no to something. And I'll give you an example, and this is a platform related example that kind of plays itself out in my life, but there is something, if you pay attention to the platform related content that I create, you'll notice that there's something that I don't spend a lot of time focusing on. So for me, I often say no to worrying about social media. Now, I think social media is totally fine. I use social media to connect. I don't use social media in a business sense very often. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't focus on it. Maybe someday I'll care more about it. Maybe someday I'll have something happen that makes me say, you know what, I got to really double down on social media. And I don't think that I think social media is a very useful thing. But because I prefer focusing on my writing and my recording, that's what I focus on. And I think I've gained good traction in those areas because I'm focused on what I enjoy doing, not on what I feel like I have to do just because someone else tells me I need to do it. I kind of look at it and I'm like, listen, I can't say yes to everything. I got to say no to some things. And so usually my biggest no is worrying about social media as a platform related tool. I just don't focus on it a lot. I focus on blogging and books and podcasting and other things like that. YouTube, I like that stuff. Social media, not so much. I just use it for family and I use it for fun. All right, step number 3, clear up your incomplete projects one at a time. I'm going to repeat that one. Step number 3, clear up your incomplete projects one at a time. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I would suspect you most likely have a series of things that you've started or at least committed yourself to, and those projects are just hanging around in an unfinished state. I would encourage you to start making some decisions with these projects. Pick one and decide if you're going to complete it or let it go. If you're going to complete it, let it become your primary focus until it's done. Don't worry about the other projects until that first one is finished. And if there are projects that you see on your list that no longer seem critical to you or they no longer seem valuable to what you're creating, it might be time to just let those things go. I think it's okay if you part ways with some of these things. In most cases, they were probably self-imposed ideas anyway. You aren't a bad person if you need to make a pivot or if you need to make a change. It doesn't make you a bad person just because you're deciding to do that. Just own your decision, move on, and clean up your list until it becomes manageable and enjoyable again. Just clean up your incomplete projects and do that one at a time. Focus on the ones that you're going to complete one at a time and delete the ones that you think, you know what, that no longer serves what I'm trying to do. I'm just going to take that off the list and not worry about the fact that it's incomplete. It's just going to be done. I'm not using it anymore. All right, step number 4 is this. And this is a biggie. If you want to actually gain momentum again, learn to focus on next steps. Learn to focus on next steps. So if you're a big picture thinker, and I know a lot of people in our members club here in Platform Launchers, I would consider them big picture thinkers. I am a big picture thinker. It can be quite a challenge though when you're a big picture thinker to think about next steps, because our minds can already see our platform in its fully developed state. So we're not really thinking next steps. We're thinking eventual outcomes. But think about the next steps if you want to prevent overwhelm. Because for your platform to really reach a place of full development, you need to take the incremental steps that will help you get there. So instead of worrying about whether or not your podcast has 1 million downloads right now, just focus on producing this week's episode. So don't worry about the 1 million downloads. Just make this week's episode. Or, the downloads will take care of themselves. That's what I think. Instead of worrying about whether or not your blog gets indexed in your favorite search engine, just focus on creating this week's post. I think it's nice to have big picture goals for what we're building, but much of that isn't under our control. All we can really do is take intentional, consistent action one step at a time. One step at a time. Learn to focus on the next steps. Every content creator eventually seems to reach a place of overwhelm and exhaustion. And maybe if you're listening to what I'm sharing right now, maybe that's where you're at right at this moment, but you don't need to stay there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling exhausted, you don't need to stay there. As I've learned from experience, and I continue to learn, we can regain momentum sometimes after pressing the pause button and then clearing out the clutter and then giving ourselves some much needed margin and then focusing on today's tasks instead of tomorrow's what ifs. So I hope that's helpful for you. That's something that I have to wrestle with a lot, and I know that many of our members think about this a lot. We want to get everything done in an instant, but here's the thing: most successful platforms will tell you, and platform creators, online platform developers, they will tell you that they were created a piece at a time, over time, by just being faithful to today's opportunities and today's tasks. So just take that to heart. I hope that's encouraging to you. A couple quick things before we part ways for this week, podcast listeners. We want to invite you over to platformlaunchers.com. We have a whole bunch of stuff over there. If you're looking for training content that will teach you how to build, grow, and monetize your online platform, that's the place to go. We're trying to make it a one-stop shop, basically, for all your platform-related needs. You'll be able to find our blog over there that has a ton of articles that will help you. You'll also find all our audio content from our podcasts. It's all over there. And if you'd like to take a 2-week test drive of our Platform Launchers Members Club membership, just stop by platformlaunchers.com. You'll gain instant access to our video training vault of many, many, many hours of content that will teach you how to build, grow, and monetize your online platform. You'll find all the tools that you need there that'll help you get started, help you grow, and you'll also get to experience the benefit of being part of some community and getting to meet other people who are developing their online platforms. And we'd certainly love to meet you if that's something that you think would be a good fit for what you're trying to build. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you again next time. Have a great week.